Have you ever felt like your life was missing something, like you were searching for a piece of a puzzle that you couldn't even picture? That's how it felt for me and Michael. For years, we lived with this quiet, unspoken ache. And then we met Jonah, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Michael and I had been married for 12 years. We were happy, at least as happy as you can be when you're carrying the weight of a dream unfulfilled. You see, we always wanted children. We pictured noisy mornings, birthday parties, tiny handprints on the walls, but life doesn't always follow your plans, does it? I can't tell you how many fertility treatments we tried, how many sleepless nights I spent crying over negative pregnancy tests. Michael always said, "It's okay, Grace. We're enough for each other." And in many ways, we were. But if I'm being honest, the silence in our home had started to feel deafening. Our friends were moving on, babies, toddlers, first days of school. Family gatherings turned into painful reminders of what we didn't have. Have you ever tried to explain to someone that you're happy for them while feeling hollow inside? It's exhausting. One day, over coffee, Michael said, "Maybe we're looking in the wrong direction. What if our child is out there waiting for us?" That's when we first talked about adoption. It wasn't an easy conversation. We had so many fears. Would we be good enough? What if the child didn't bond with us? But deep down, we knew we had love to give. Welcome to Anonymous Stories. Over here, we narrate stories we receive in our mail from people all over the world. Today, we share a story from one lady from Ohio. The names used are not the real names of the individual characters. Support us by subscribing to our channel, like and share this story with your friends and loved ones. Now let's get into the story. We spent weeks researching agencies, filling out paperwork, and attending meetings. The process was overwhelming, but one agency stood out to us, a smaller organization that focused on placing older children. That's where we first heard about Jonah. He was 9 years old, with a quiet demeanor and the kind of polite smile that melted my heart. The social worker described him as resilient, resourceful, and independent. I'll admit, those words worried me. What had this child been through to make him so independent at just 9 years old? When we met Jonah for the first time, something happened that I still can't explain. Have you ever felt like you've known someone before you've actually met them? That's how I felt the moment I saw him. He had these intense, searching eyes, and when he looked at me, it was like he saw right through me. "Hi," he said simply, his voice steady but soft. I remember fumbling for words, feeling like I needed to impress him somehow. Isn't that funny? Me, trying to impress a 9-year-old. Michael knelt to his level and said, "Hi, Jonah. We're Michael and Grace. We've heard a lot about you." Jonah just nodded, as if he already knew who we were. The social worker handed me a thin file with Jonah's history. There wasn't much in it, just some medical records, a brief summary of his time in foster care, and a single photo of him at a younger age. When I opened the file, my eyes caught on a small doodle in the corner of one of the pages. It looked like a simple swirl, almost like a spiral. It was strange, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Jonah moved in with us 3 weeks later. Those first days were a blur of excitement and nerves. He was polite to a fault, always saying thank you and please, but he kept a part of himself guarded. It wasn't until I found him one night, sitting by the window and staring at the moon, that I realized just how much he'd been through. "What are you thinking about, Jonah?" I asked softly. He glanced at me, his eyes as deep as a well, and said, "Nothing. Just wondering if things will be different now." I didn't press him, but his words stayed with me. Different how? And why did it feel like he was speaking to something, or someone, beyond me? Looking back, I wonder, was that the moment I should have asked more questions? Or was it already too late? What would you have done in my place? From the day Jonah moved in, it felt like he had always been part of our lives. He called me Mom and Michael Dad without hesitation. He never complained, never threw tantrums, and always said the right thing at the right time. Friends would comment, "Grace, you're so lucky. Most kids his age are glued to their phones or rolling their eyes at everything. And I'd smile and agree, but deep down, I wondered if it was normal for a child to be this well-adjusted. Jonah wasn't just a good kid, he was exceptional. At school, his teachers couldn't stop raving about him. He aced his exams, joined the chess club, learned the piano in 6 months, and still found time to volunteer at the local animal shelter. I'll admit, Michael and I basked in the glow of his accomplishments. After years of feeling like we'd missed out on parenthood, we finally felt complete. But then, there were the little things. "Jonah, what are you drawing?" I asked one evening, noticing him hunched over the dining table, with a pencil in hand. He quickly pulled the paper away and shrugged. "Just doodling." I didn't push, but later that night, curiosity got the better of me. When Jonah went to bed, I found the sketch tucked under a pile of schoolwork. It wasn't a random doodle, it was a detailed map of something. There were no names, just strange symbols connected by intricate lines, like a maze or a circuit board. In the corner was that same spiral I'd seen in his adoption file. "Grace, let it go," Michael said when I showed him. "Kids have wild imaginations." He's probably just copying something he saw online. Maybe Michael was right. Or maybe I didn't want to admit that I'd started to notice other odd things about Jonah. Take the mirrors, for example. He refused to have any in his room. If I asked him about it, he'd shrug and say, "I just don't like them." Once, I caught him covering the bathroom mirror with a towel, muttering something under his breath. And then there were the blinds, always drawn, even on the brightest days. "It's like living in a cave," I joked once, trying to lighten the mood. "Don't you want to let some light in?" "No," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. I told myself it was just his way of coping with whatever trauma he'd endured before coming to us. But as Jonah grew older, my unease grew with him. By the time he was a teenager, Jonah was a local celebrity. He won academic scholarships, led the debate team to nationals, and even got featured in the town's newspaper for designing an app that helped local businesses. Michael was bursting with pride, and I was too, mostly. But sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering, how does he do it? You see, Jonah wasn't just succeeding, he was excelling in ways that didn't add up. He spoke about things he couldn't possibly know, quoted books we didn't own, and always seemed to be one step ahead of everyone else. One evening, I decided to bring it up. "Jonah," I began, trying to sound casual, "how do you stay so motivated?" Most teenagers would kill for a lazy Saturday. He looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable. "I just don't want to waste time, Mom." "Waste time on what?" "On things that don't matter." The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the answer of a typical teenager. It was the answer of someone who had seen more than they should. I laughed it off, but the question lingered. What does Jonah think doesn't matter? And then there were the nights. I'd wake up to find him sitting by the window again, staring at the sky. Sometimes, he'd whisper things I couldn't quite hear, and when I asked about it, he'd smile and say, "Just thinking, Mom. Go back to bed." But here's the thing, I never saw my reflection in the glass when Jonah sat by that window. By the time Jonah turned 22, he was already a name people whispered about. The boy genius, they called him in the local papers. He'd launched a tech startup out of our garage, and within months, it had secured funding from investors I'd only read about in Forbes. Michael and I would sit at the dinner table, scrolling through articles about our son, unable to keep up with his meteoric rise. "Grace," Michael said one evening, shaking his head in disbelief, "do you realize our son's company is valued in the millions?" Millions. That word didn't feel real. Neither did the polished offices he showed us on a tour one weekend, or the fact that he had employees twice his age calling him sir. Jonah moved through this new world effortlessly, shaking hands with CEOs, delivering speeches at conferences, and signing deals with a confidence that seemed far beyond his years. But for me, it wasn't just pride, it was bewilderment. At a gala celebrating his company's latest milestone, Jonah introduced us to a man named Richard Lawson, a venture capitalist who had backed Jonah's startup. The moment I saw Richard, a strange sensation washed over me. His face was familiar, but not in a way I could place. "Have we met before?" I asked, extending my hand. Richard hesitated for just a moment too long. "I don't believe so, Mrs. Martin. But I've heard a lot about you from Jonah. He speaks very highly of you." His words were polite, his smile charming, but there was something in his eyes that felt evasive. That night, I combed through old photographs, trying to figure out why Richard's face felt like a ghost from my past. Then, there was the money. It started with small surprises, new appliances appearing in the kitchen, our worn-out couch replaced with a sleek leather one. Michael assumed Jonah was just being generous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And then, one morning, I logged into our joint bank account to pay the bills and nearly dropped my coffee cup. The balance was staggering, enough to pay off our mortgage and still have plenty left over. "Michael!" I called, my voice shaking. "Did you see this?" He hurried over, his face a mix of confusion and joy. "Where did this come from?" When Jonah came home that evening, we confronted him. "It's from me," he said simply, as if dropping tens of thousands of dollars into someone's account was no big deal. "I wanted to make sure you didn't have to worry about anything anymore." "Jonah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "where is this money coming from? Are you in some kind of trouble?" He laughed, a soft, almost pitying sound. "No, Mom. I'm not in trouble. I've just been fortunate." Fortunate. That word hung in the air like a weight. Later that night, as we sat around the fireplace after a celebratory dinner, Jonah looked at us with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "I need to tell you something," he began. "You've always been honest with me, so I think it's time I'm honest with you." Michael and I exchanged a glance, bracing ourselves. "I've known, for a long time, that I'm not like other people," Jonah continued. "I've always felt guided. Like there's someone, or something, out there steering me in the right direction." "What do you mean by guided?" I asked cautiously. "For years, I've been getting messages," Jonah admitted. "Emails, letters, even calls, anonymous, but always helpful. They tell me what decisions to make, who to trust, where to invest my time and money. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, but it's more than that. Whoever this person is, they've been right about everything." Michael leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "And you don't know who this person is? Not even a name?" Jonah shook his head. "No. But they've never led me astray." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But the more he spoke, the more the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The idea of a stranger pulling the strings behind Jonah's success felt unnatural. Who were they? And why had they chosen Jonah? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Jonah's words echoed in my mind, blending with my own doubts and fears. "Do you think we're meant to understand everything about the people we love? Or are there some truths we're better off not knowing?" It started innocently enough. A nagging curiosity, a mother's intuition. Jonah's success, his connections, even the strangers he introduced us to, it all seemed too perfect, too orchestrated. So, one day, when Michael was out and Jonah was busy with work, I sat down at my computer and started digging. I began with his adoption records, something I'd never thought to question before. But the deeper I looked, the stranger it all seemed. His file was unusually sparse, just enough information to suggest he'd been in the foster system, but nothing concrete about his biological family. That struck me as odd. Most adoption records I'd seen in support groups had at least a few details. Then, I found it. A single name buried in an old caseworker's report, Elizabeth Caro. The name tugged at my memory, and after some searching, I realized why. Elizabeth was listed as the executor of a trust fund tied to a series of businesses I'd heard Jonah mention in passing. It was no coincidence. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why would a wealthy trustee have any connection to a boy supposedly abandoned by his family? I couldn't stop there. Over the next few days, I pieced together a picture that didn't make sense, at least, not at first. Jonah's biological parents weren't just ordinary people who had fallen on hard times. They were part of an elite network of business people, quietly pooling resources to influence the next generation of leaders. Jonah hadn't been placed in foster care out of desperation. He'd been hidden, strategically moved into a normal family environment to cultivate a particular kind of upbringing. Someone had chosen us. When I confronted Jonah about it, I didn't mince words. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice trembling as I stood in the doorway of his office. Jonah's expression changed, his usual calm confidence gave way to something I hadn't seen before, guilt. "Mom, I didn't want you to find out like this," he said softly. "Find out what, Jonah?" I demanded. "That we were just a part of some plan? That none of this was real?" He sighed and motioned for me to sit, but I stayed rooted in place, my arms crossed tightly across my chest. "You were real," he said. "Everything you and Dad gave me, that was real. But there's more to my story than I told you." And then he told me. Jonah explained that his biological parents had been part of an organization that believed in creating future leaders by any means necessary. They had chosen him, not for his abilities, but for his potential. When his parents passed away, their network took over, making sure he was placed with a family that could give him stability and values without the weight of wealth or privilege. That family was us. I felt sick. "So, what are we?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Just tools? Part of some experiment?" "No." Jonah's voice rose in frustration. "You gave me something they couldn't, love, normalcy. That's why they chose you. Because they knew you'd raise me right. And the money? The connections? All those strangers who keep showing up in our lives? They've been helping me," Jonah admitted. "Guiding me. It's not all my own work, I'll admit that. But everything I've done for you and Dad. To make sure you're proud of me." His words were like a slap. Proud? How could I be proud of something that wasn't his to begin with? "Jonah," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "you lied to us. You've been lying this whole time." He didn't answer, but his silence spoke volumes. Michael was furious when I told him, but he processed it differently. "So what if they helped him?" he said. "He's still our son. None of this changes that." But for me, it did change something. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just pieces in someone else's game, our lives shaped by a web of power and secrecy we'd never agreed to be part of. What would you do if you found out your family was a lie? Would you forgive the person who kept the truth from you, or would you walk away? That night, as I lay awake in bed, I couldn't stop wondering, if Jonah's rise to success had been carefully constructed, what else had been planned? And who was really pulling the strings? That question had haunted me ever since Jonah's confession. For weeks, I couldn't look at him the same way. Every success, every achievement, every act of kindness, it all felt tainted by the knowledge that we had been chosen, not by fate, but by someone's careful design. Michael, ever the steady one, tried to console me. "Grace," he'd say, "does it matter how he came to us? He's still our son." But to me, it did matter. If our love wasn't the foundation of Jonah's success, then what was? One evening, Jonah came to us, his face serious but calm. "Mom, Dad," he began, sitting us down at the kitchen table, "I need to tell you something." My heart raced. "What now?" "I know everything I've told you has been overwhelming," he said. "I didn't mean for it to hurt you, and I don't want you to feel used. You gave me a life I never could have imagined, and for that, I'm grateful. But there's one more thing you should know." He paused, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. "Regret? Relief?" "I'm leaving," he said finally. The words hit like a thunderclap. "Leaving?" Michael repeated. "For good, Jonah nodded. There's a new opportunity overseas, something I've been working on for years. It's a chance to start fresh, away from all this. I felt the air leave my lungs. Jonah, you can't just. I've thought about this, he interrupted gently. I've built something amazing here, but it's time for me to move on. Before I go, though, I want to make sure you're taken care of. He slid an envelope across the table. Michael opened it, his hands trembling. Inside was a legal document outlining a trust fund Jonah had set up in our names. The amount was staggering, enough to secure not just our retirement, but the futures of generations to come. Jonah, I whispered, tears welling up, we never asked for this. I know, he said, his voice steady. But you deserve it. You gave me something no one else could, love, stability, and a place to call home. This is the least I can do to thank you. I wanted to believe him, to take his words at face value, but the nagging doubt remained. Was this gratitude, or guilt? The night before he left, I found Jonah in the living room, staring out the window. For once, the blinds were open and moonlight spilled into the room. Jonah, I said softly, can I ask you something? He turned, his expression unreadable. Was any of this real? Us, this family. Was it ever more than just part of the plan? He stepped closer, his face solemn. Mom, you and Dad were the best thing that ever happened to me. No plan could have created that. I wanted to believe him. I really did. The next morning, Jonah was gone. No grand farewell, no lingering goodbyes, just a note on the kitchen table that read, "Thank you for everything. I'll always love you." Michael and I sat in silence for a long time, the house feeling emptier than it ever had before. Do you ever wonder if you were meant to be someone's stepping stone, or if they were meant to be yours? In the end, we may never know Jonah's full story. The truth about his past, the shadowy figures who guided him, the reason we were chosen, it's a mystery we'll carry for the rest of our lives. But as I sit here, telling you all this, one thing is clear, Jonah was our son, no matter how he came to us. And in the end, isn't that what matters most? Years have passed since Jonah left. The house he paid off still stands strong, a quiet reminder of his presence. Michael and I have tried to move forward, but Jonah's shadow lingers in our lives, both as a source of pride and a wellspring of unanswered questions. We hear from him occasionally. Postcards from far-off places arrive without return addresses, each bearing a simple note, "I'm doing well. I hope you are too. Love, Jonah." No matter how brief, those words are enough to remind us that, in his own way, he still cares. The trust fund he left behind has allowed us to live comfortably, even generously. We've helped others the way we once helped Jonah, offering stability and kindness where it's needed most. I'd like to think that's what he would have wanted, to see the good he brought into our lives ripple outwards. Do I still wonder about the mystery surrounding him? Of course. The faces of those influential figures, the inexplicable connections, the reason we were chosen, all of it still plays in my mind like an unfinished puzzle. But life has taught me that not every mystery needs solving. Sometimes, it's enough to cherish the part you played in someone else's story, even if you don't fully understand it. What about you? Have you ever been part of someone's life in ways you didn't fully comprehend? Have you wondered about the footprints you've left on their path, or theirs on yours? I realize that love, even when imperfect or unexpected, is never wasted. Jonah may have been a mystery, but he was also a gift, a reminder that sometimes life's greatest blessings come wrapped in the unknown. Thank you for listening to our story. If it touched you, made you think, or left you with questions, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Let's keep this conversation going, because every story, including yours, has the power to inspire. It's Anonymous Stories. See you soon for our next story.